welcome to another exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and I am joined tonight by an amazing guest who many of you have seen with his podcast show. And full transparency, I actually had to trim his bio because it was too long. So I had to figure out what to pick and choose. And so I hope you all are tuning in because there is more than what the bio had from my guest. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the one, the only, the amazing, talented, blessed, and honored to call brother, Drago Reid.
How's everybody doing today? It's awesome to be on here, man. Like, you stay busy with these podcasts, and I remember when we decided to do this, it was like 5 months in advance. I'm like, good for you, man. Like, staying that booked. Like, that's amazing, man. Like, I love listening to your interviews and hearing my friends speak.
Well, thank you. And I'm excited to finally have you on. And I remember, too, when we were talking about, the episode, you put up a picture and said, hey, here's my studio. And I was like, I don't really have a studio. And you're like, so what? Just show your space. And I was like, all right.
And that was cool because that kind of started a little comment thread where people were actually posting what it's like to see in front of them. And everybody's always curious. They only see us as people behind the screen and as a personality. But like, everybody wonders, where are we at? Are we in a house? Are we in like an office space? Like, where the heck are these people? So it's cool to like show off our personal spots, and you can see all of our personalities in each spot. So it's cool to actually see each people put together how they put it together. Like, you have a very complicated setup. Like, I just have a laptop sitting in front of me and like art. And like your stuff is so ornate. I want to get something like that, which is really cool. I'm like, when I seen your setup, I was like, good Lord.
I know it was a work in progress. And I originally was looking at doing like the virtual backgrounds that I see everybody use on the shows. And I was like, yeah, that's really cool. But then I was like, on one episode, I used them and like my arm would disappear. And so I was like, yeah, I don't want people starting to question, am I phasing in and out? Why is my body disappearing? And so I was like, yeah, virtual is not going to work for me.
People actually ask me all the time if this is a virtual background. I'm like, no, man, those are my freaking books. That is my speaker I make music on. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is me.
I know, and you got such the nice chair. It's like, you're like sitting in like the regal chair.
Well, check this out, man. I always imagined podcasting from Morpheus' chair from the Matrix. So I literally put my intentions out there, and I found the chair within 2 weeks on Facebook Marketplace. This chair looks almost like the chair that Neo and Matrix sat in. So I always wanted to deliver the red pill from the red chair.
That is awesome.
In the land of the real, like Morpheus says. So I'm like, there's nothing cooler than having like the Matrix chair talking around the world, man.
I agree. That is quite a chair to be in and to live up to, and you do.
I try, man. I study really hard, 7 days a week. I never take a day off learning or writing my books or creating my presentations or like. It's a full-time lifestyle, man, and it's something I can't stop. I don't really know what to do with like a regular day off. Like, I have to complete stuff. It's something I learned from the program. It's something they programmed into me. It's like complete task, complete task, complete task. So if I don't, I get anxiety. It's just like, if you knew me personally, you would laugh because I get up all the time and leave the room because I think about something. You know how some people, they think about completing something? They'll put it on a mental list. I'll do it at that moment in time. Because I wasted, I don't know how much of my life, man, where I would want to accomplish so many things, and I just put it on this bucket list that I never completed. And I realized I wasted like 20 years of my life. And so the last, I would say 15 solid years, I'm almost 45. So the last 15 years, man, I've been like full speed ahead, full deep dive into the occult, into the esoteric, reading Sumerian tablets. I've read over 4,000 books. Like, in order to do stuff like that, man, you've got to do this as a lifetime kind of pursuit where it never ends. Like, I have so many books. I look around, I have so many books that I got to read. And it's my lifetime goal. One of my number one goals on my bucket list is to read every book I ever bought that I have in my library. And like, I was just at the Rebels of Disclosure conference last month, and I bought so many freaking books. And then I went to Contact in the Desert. That was like a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. It was this month. And I bought like 15 or 20 more books. So it's just like, I keep piling up all these books at all the conventions I'm going to. I'm like, when am I going to have time to get all of my friends' books? I'm like so overwhelmed. I feel like the eccentric guy that is surrounded by piles of books, and it looks insane. And he's always in the office reading material, and always just like, he's deep diving. Like, it's always knowledge, read. I got to know freaking everything. So that's who I am now.
Actually, you know who I got a mental image of you being with all the books? The never-ending story guy.
Which one? That's actually one of my favorite kid movies, man. I always go back to that movie.
The first one where he's like introduced to the book and he hands him the book and he's like, here, read this. It's like that's the image I have of you with all the books going as being the old man handing your younger self, here, read this book.
Honestly, I've heard through QHHT, through my sessions, that I have the ability to explain complicated concepts as if I'm talking to a child. And anybody can understand my analogies for physics or space travel or mathematics or something that's complicated that you would have no formal training and understanding. Does that make sense? So they told me that I did this for the kids. This is for the future of humanity and the things that we're talking about in this time, in this space. It's not for us, it's for them. So these are the keys to their awakening, and we're giving them the codes and downloads now through our voices. And this is meant for them to take over that torch that we're going to pass on to them, and they're going to be the true warriors after we pass.
Right. That's where I picked up from Heidi Pop and a lot of people saying, yeah, we're the way showers. And I was like, I love that term because it sums up who we are so much better than saying healer, podcaster, investigator. And you're like, well, I'm all of those things, but I'm not just those things. So it's like, yeah. So I feel like that works for you too.
It's funny, going back to the Never-Ending Story, not only am I intimately connected to that movie, I probably know more trivia from that movie and the names of the characters than anyone I've ever met in my life, including the movie The Labyrinth. Like, there's an esoteric and occult Freemason symbolism all throughout the story. It's crazy, but currently I have a couple of fish tanks, like 3 different fish tanks, and I have eels and all kinds of cool stuff, right? And I have this mountain in one of my fish tanks, and I call it Morla. Morla is the name of that giant turtle that Atreyu got caught in with that mud when he lost Artax's horse.
Right.
So it was that sneezing mountain that turned out to be a giant freaking turtle. So that mountain is called Morla, and one of my eels is named Falcor.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I was like, when I watched that movie, I thought this was so cool. And the story, I was like, I felt like that could be my story. But then I was like, yeah. And I thought about it recently and started looking at everything that happened in that movie. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a disclosure movie. This is so much more than we realized.
It's basically saying that we lost our connection to the truth and to true Gnostic, true knowing of the self. And basically we perpetuate this matrix where we no longer believe in magic. We no longer believe in fairy tales and stories where the hero truly wins, because The Labyrinth is a movie about the hero's journey, about exposing all your flaws and getting beat down and to the point where it almost kills you. And at the very end, you come out and you don't die. You know, that's basically the epic story of all of us. That's our journey. We are that child, both the child reading the book and the character in the book. It is both of you, because everything is you. So it's kind of like learning something about yourself that you didn't think existed in with yourself, but then you realize you power each character and you put your own energy and fantasy and like energy into that character to succeed. So in a way, you become that character because you learn a life lesson at that point. And that's why I believe reading is so important. I don't care if it's science fiction or just nonfiction or fiction. Learn the stories, learn the mistakes the character made, therefore you can apply it to your own life. So it doesn't matter what you're into. Look for lessons that you can learn. Look for stuff that will give you aha moments and allow you to go down the rabbit hole. But that's what the life's journey is, man, the hero's journey. And in the end, as long as you can manifest it in your mind and see that you completed everything you ever wanted to complete, then in the end, you're going to have no regrets, because you made it a lifelong journey in order to check off that bucket list, man, like I'm doing now, because 45 and like I'm not getting younger. So it's time to complete all these things, because I don't want to be one of those people that dies with regrets. Like through QHHT, we found out that one of the biggest regrets people die of on the deathbed is living for others, living for my family, living for my children, and not living for myself. So basically, taking that burden or that privilege to be a caretaker of a child or a husband or a wife or something like that, it's a lifelong thing, and that can change who you are. But like, people need to, most of the people I meet, they don't even have hobbies. I said, what's the thing you love most in your life? My children. No, let's remove the family from that. What makes you you? Oh, my family makes me me. I'm like, do you see how this is circular in motion rhetorically? You're basically admitting that the true you don't even exist. You are a product of nothing. You probably don't have long-term goals, and if you did, you probably convinced yourself you're never going to complete them, because maybe you can't afford it, or maybe because you're overwhelmed with being a parent, or like working 80 hours a week in a job you think that basically owns you, man. Like, you're the problem for your own problems. You know, most of the people, anybody in this audience that has a reoccurring hip, ankle, or knee problems, this is a reminder from your spirit that you're messing up. And you're going to know it, because if you think about it, every time you have that injury in one of those three places, and odds are if it's reoccurring, then it's a reminder over and over. And if you mess up, you only get so many chances. You might lose that body part. It might fail one day and you got to get an artificial limb, because that's the only way spirit can truly communicate with the physical body in this matrix. So it can only communicate through emotions, through mathematics, like numerology, and also through the physical body. That's what we found out with Dolores Cannon's method, quantum healing hypnosis technique. So a lot of these random pains are not random. If you understand that this is a holographic matrix, it's not random. Everything you experience is part of a hologram, part of a matrix. So every person you come across, every pain you get, that is a reminder. If you're around a certain type of person all the time and you can't stand that type of person, that's an internal battle that will keep playing out throughout time, lifetime after lifetime, until you stand up to that type of person, because odds are it's a power dichotomy. You know, overpowering, submissive. And it's kind of like the abused wife, where the husband beats her, but she never truly leaves and walks away. And she perpetuates it by staying in the marriage or staying in a relationship, thinking she can't go nowhere because maybe she might not have money. She might not have family. There's always excuses. And if you think about anyone who's ever left their behind like me, I like left their life behind. I left my life dyslexia, traumatic brain injury. When I left my life behind, sounds like a name of a country song. When I left in 2015 from Texas, I had to let it all go, man. All the relationships, all my friends, all my businesses, all my success, all the money, because I realized one day I wasn't happy. And then I saw myself 10 years from now, owning the same businesses, having the same habits, more race cars, more expensive race cars. That's who I was in Texas. Constant building custom cars, custom motorcycles, and like, I was also a motorcycle stunner for a long time on a motorcycle stunt team called Suicide Lifestyles in Fort Worth, Texas. And that team was known for making the original VHS tapes that went around before the internet, where people would buy these VHS tapes, and it was all these stunners. And they came from our team, and we had a super famous stunner on our team, man, and he would always stunt in just like his shorts. Never broke a body, never broke a bone. It's like this guy was so cocky. It was like he was Superman. Like he never went down. It was just like, to watch that level of skill, man, it was inspiring, man. But I had to give all that up. I had that traumatic bike crash in 2005, which kind of changed the trajectory of my life, and it kind of awakened me and like gave me all kinds of abilities, gave me all kinds of like deficits. But it allowed me to give me a forced awakening where I kickstarted a lot of memories that happened throughout my childhood that I never truly lost. Like my childhood memories, I tell people I have around 20 to 25 memories. Those are like childhood memories. That has nothing to do with being in the programs. I have a lot of memories of that stuff. I don't include that. I'm talking about the civilian life of Drago as a child. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Somehow a lot of that's just gone. But the more QHHT I did, the more I would get memories of what happened in the programs, how I was involved with the secret space program, how I went through MK Ultra, just like, and it kind of vindicated. I always mix those words up. It vindicated me because hearing all these speakers come out since like 2016, like Corey Good and all these other people that kind of followed his lead, it allowed me to believe I wasn't crazy. Because like you couldn't openly talk about these realms to the public. And every time I tried to do that over the years, even amongst my friends, I would just give them pebbles and they would just look at me like I'm crazy. Because no one was really truly talking about this stuff mainstream. Like it was more esoteric in nature, only known by few, and it was definitely a cult. It was hidden from the public because no one knew it existed.
Right.
So like,
yeah, and I mean, it's hard for people to realize, like simple things like I would draw pictures of a mountain with a military base inside of it, but there were no doors. And everyone would just say, "Oh, that's just your imagination," or "Oh, you must have seen that in a movie." I'm like, "What movie has that?" And
and I've got that so many times.
Yeah, so it's like we program ourselves through society to go, "Yeah, we're just making this up," and so we dismiss a lot of things. And it's until, like you're saying, people started coming forward, and you're like, "Wait a minute." They're having similar experiences like I had, maybe, just maybe, and then it's like it starts the cycle of, oh, so this is what I was doing.
Yeah, because when you have other people talking about details that only you experienced and something you couldn't really read about, because like I've had so many SSP experiences. The most confusing thing is nailing down what program it was in. Because like they program us with face blindness and name blindness. And this is why in real life, the life of Drago, I'm really bad with names. I'm really bad with faces. You have to really interact with me on a regular basis, and then I'll remember you. But like most of the people, it's just like they come and they go, and like they were just part of my imagination in a way. You know what I'm saying? How a dream comes and it fades away. You couldn't remember nothing.
Right.
But like I've learned that interacting with people on a regular basis, and I tell people, keep telling me your name throughout this conversation. Like, if you're meeting me at a convention or something, just keep telling me your name and I'm going to get it. I will freaking try to focus and I'll try to keep saying your name. Therefore, I will, I'll establish that. But like, that's what I have to do. You have to use techniques with brain injuries where you can it's kind of like if I realize I have a deficit, I'll use a binaural kind of way. I'll use both hemispheres of my brain. I'll use physical actions while I'm performing a mental action. It's kind of like if I'm thinking while I'm walking. Most people look up to down when they walk, as if you're walking down the sidewalk. Let's see. It's kind of hard to make the shape on here, but imagine you're going down the sidewalk. And basically you look up to down, right? There's a trick that I learned where when I'm thinking of information, I'm walking, I'll move my eyes left to right, horizon style. And it's regular people can't do it and walk straight because it'll hurt your head. But what that's doing is when you're having these complex thoughts, if you start activating the left and right scan of the brain, it's linking both sides, connecting to that memory and that emotion, and it actually builds a neural connection to that memory. So I've developed all these techniques that I trial ran, and they all started working because like when I hit that wall, over time it somehow increased my IQ and allowed me to understand complicated concepts. Like, you're right, my bio is freaking long, man. And like, I don't know how to do the whole Drago Reid right there. It's just like, how do you summarize something so complicated with so much experiences and like put it in a paragraph? And it's challenging for me because I've tried to rewrite my bio so many times, but it's just like, I'm removing so much of me. And like all the subjects I'm into, I had to cut out like 50 of those, man, because it's like, I started hearing people like read my bio in the beginning. When I started doing this, I'm like, that is painfully long, man. Like if I do a bio that long and it takes over 5 minutes, which I do on my show, Portal to Another Dimension. I have that show with Laura Eisenhower, the Rebel Collective. Right. But on my show, I do a lot. I'm really known for doing a lot of long custom bios where observations you don't normally see off. Give me a bio of Michael Kopf. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's nothing like that. It's like research. And I try to formulate something that's cool. And by the time I read it, you're like, damn, man, that is like one of the most amazing bios I've ever heard. Like when I read Jason Quit's on Laura and I's show, he was like taken back. He's like, that is the best bio I've ever heard in my life, man. I'm like, wow. Same thing with G. Edward Griffin. You know about G. Edward Griffin's work?
No, I'm not familiar.
He was the guy. Did you see the Plandemic series about the?
Yeah.
Okay, so he was in Plandemic 3. He's the base character for the entire actual part 3. And he was the guy. He was like the original David Icke. And when I say original David Icke, I'm talking about he was coming out doing lectures in black and white TV days. And his most famous lectures that he did, it was on Plandemic. And they're notorious. He is so known, man. Like, and it's an honor that Laura and I got to interview him, because I think he's like in his mid-90s. So that's like, you know, interviewing somebody at the very crescendo of their life and having that honor to take part in that. And like, God forbid they pass away and you never have that chance. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like Russell Targ. I just seen Russell Targ get contact in the desert, and like, Russell doesn't look good, man. Like, mentally, he's not there. He doesn't really have normal conversations. And like, it sucks to see that, man, because I've always wanted to interview Russell Targ, man. Like, Stanford Research Institute and all that stuff, and developing lasers and all those technologies, man. And it's just like, damn it, man. I was going to do that. And that's part of my wasting my life analogy. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, I love a lot of rock and roll, like late 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's like one of my favorite genres. And like, one of my favorite bands is the Scorpions and the Eagles and like stuff like that. And like, they all keep dying. And like, I've always told myself, I'm going to see them. And like, I'm going to see them. And like, they come to Tampa. And then I'm working. I'm like, damn it, I'll get them next time because I was busy. And then they die the next year. And I'm just like, nothing but freaking regret. So the new me, I'm starting to do more stuff. I'm stepping forward. Like when me and Laura started our show, May 15th of last year. So we just hit our 1-year show. And that's freaking cool, man. It's been a really cool ride, like partnering with her and being a co-host of freaking Laura Eisenhower, man. She's a freaking icon, man.
I know.
Like,
how did you end up landing that?
So I've known Laura over 10 years, and like I've always followed her behind the scenes and went to the shows, and like Laura is an extremely busy person, right? So if you ever interact with Laura, don't do the average chit chat with her. Say something profound, say something memorable. Just go into like the woo woo or like the left field, like me. If you meet me in real life, don't small talk me, because I'm allergic. I'm not compatible. My mind is not compatible with small-minded chit-chat. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to like. It's like we say something and we're exchanging sentence after sentence and we pause and it's like, this is so freaking boring, man. How about we just go to like, man, do you believe in past life regression or like reincarnation? Like, what kind of stuff? You know, what are you into, man? Like you mentioned the never-ending story, like. Hell yeah, man. Like all kinds of rabbit holes we can go down. Like, do you believe in the Matrix? Do you believe like when you die, it's nothing but darkness and the lights go out forever? Like, do you really believe that? You know, like go existential. Like that's how you become memorable. That's how you make connections. So I was the guy that always just kind of paid attention behind the scenes, and I would be in their comments and I would see what she would read. And I would always try to make my comments the most intelligent, poignant, non-waste of time for her to read it. So I always tried to drop like next level information, and I always try to have my information be so good that people try to fact check me and they're like, holy crap, he's right. Like, I did not know that. And I just hook people further down the rabbit hole. So like, I don't know, man. It's just like, I've always tried to be there for her when she was going through stuff over those 10 years. And I was truly in the comments and direct messages. And I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? Like, I've been through a lot of trauma myself. Well, this is what I do. Like, lifelong study of psychology. Like, you know, we just kind of just hit it off as friends, man. And fast forward years later, I actually finally convinced her to come down to Tampa. She's doing a convention locally with, I forgot what city it was in. I think it was Sarasota. And she finally agreed to let me tattoo her. So she comes down, she spends like 2 days at my tattoo shop, and we probably talk 15, 20 hours. Like, do you know the amount of conversations you can have with two fast talking people in 15 to 20 hours? That's straight to the point. Yeah. So we basically discover that, like, dude, our combined knowledge is like next level, and it's not common to have two types of people where it's like you talk about what they're into, and like, you know, the details, and like you complement each other's, like, what I don't know she would know, and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? It's just like two powerful freaking minds. And she's like, Drago, we have to have a show. I'm like, we were walking. It was like between a tattoo break and stuff. And like, the funny thing is, I tell Laura this. I mentioned to her like 2 or 3 times that when I first got into QHHT, I had a regression done on me. And I was shown that I would have a show with Laura freaking Eisenhower. And that I was kind of showing my future in that. And it kind of freaked me out. Because what it did was, when I walked away from Texas in 2015, I walked away from everything. I did not post an updated photo of myself since I left in April of 2015. I went dark. I started researching into WikiLeaks, finding out that they're stealing all our biometric data from our videos, from the front screen, the rear screens, and like, I couldn't take part in that biometric theft of my own private property of my freaking face, man, in my eyes. Like, when I started realizing the iPhone was using eye retina scan, I'm like, do you know what they can do with a freaking eye retina scan? Part of your cosmic history is written into the fabric of your freaking eyes. The colors typically represent what your original root star system is, and the way the fibers shape and the different specks, and if you have limbo rings on the outside, the colors even, it tells you so much. And I believe the eyes are like fingerprints. And like, a lot of people have this theory that you have the same eyes in every life. That is not how it works, man. When we are light beings made of white light. We don't have physical bodies outside this matrix. Like outside the higher densities, it's all non-physical, like non-corporeal life forms. It's all energetic in nature, light-based, Taurus-based, and like it's just amazing to have this knowledge and to know that, dude, we're surrounded by beings at all times. Like I think about my podcast room, and before I started, I said, "Welcome all beings," because you have to realize. I also found out through QHHT that these freaking ETs, they're tuning in and they're listening to our broadcasts. So we don't just have a human viewership, we have a galactic viewership. And this has been proven in the programs with the SSP. Like certain programs, there's no TV, there's no nothing. It's all just slavery. And no expression, no freedom of expression, no sense of self, no nothing, no religion, nothing to look forward to except produce and be beaten and be used. Like that sucks, man. But like these beings, man, they're tuning in from so many different places. It's a freaking honor to take play. Like it's a freaking honor. Like remember the photo I posted? It says live on air. I have this neon that's sitting on my glass sliding door in my library, which is my podcast room. And it literally says live on air. And no one sees it but me. But I was told in QHHT, they told me the moment I put live on air, even though I don't physically start the interview yet, that's the moment they start listening. So I always do it for them. I say, welcome all beings. I look around. Like I can't imagine how many orbs are around me right now. Like just my spirit family and the different facets of their existences, and they're around all of us. Like the beings in your room now, like we're surrounded at all times. And like it sucks to be a programmed human where you think that you're just insignificant and there's nothing in space, and like we're the only planet in the freaking everything that has life on it. Like, are you serious, man? If you think the entire freaking cosmos full of more planets than there are grains of sand on this planet and all planets in the known galaxy, there's more life and more planets. You are naive. Wake up. Stop judging. Stop being so dogmatic with your beliefs. Like, if you're a die-hard Christian and you don't believe in reincarnation, go back further. Read the Pistis Sophia. Was written right. It was written before the Bible. That was the Gnostic version. It showed what Jesus really taught. It shows that Jesus taught reincarnation. And the Council of Nicaea in 325 removed it. Emperor Constantine, Yahweh / Enlil, the Anunnaki, same guy. Basically, they had Jesus crucified for basically speaking out. And in the Pistis Sophia, it says, Yahweh, you are not the true God. You are just a man. You are a being that can die. So you have Jesus calling out his alleged father in the Bible saying, you are not my father. So go figure, connect those dots. And then you go back even further, read the Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Like, you start reading these Sumerian epics and realize that the Bible is a summary form of all these ancient tablets in like Sumeria. And that they're a combination of like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I think it's spell 116 of the Egyptian Book of the Dead is one of the tenets of Christianity. Like the Ten Commandments, that came from Ma'at of Egypt. You know? And it's just like everything is derived from Egypt and even further, and they think Christianity just started out of nowhere. These rules came out of nowhere. No, man. These are ancient rules. Like, they go back way farther than people and imagine, and like all of our history starts, all religions. They came from above. They came down. Let's make man in our image. That doesn't make sense. It's God. Who you talking to, man? Like, our image. What do you mean, man? You know, so you start realizing we've been lied to. And we're all in a stage of awakening. So again, where are you at, Mike?
And another point of that, too, is when we look at the Bible, I was talking with the guest about it, going, you know, when we look at Adam and Eve, we're like, these are the first two humans. They had sons. Well, their sons married daughters of other tribes. I'm like, wait, where did these other tribes come from if you only had two humans?
Well, think about this. There
So
were
it's
13 total tribes.
Yeah.
What they were talking about is Adamu, Adam, the direct descendant of the Anunnaki, mixing their DNA with the current hominid of the planet that existed at that time as part of the other tribes. So the number 13 goes that far back. It's the original 13 tribes, which is 13 different bloodlines. It shows on all Freemasonry. It shows on the dollar bill. We have 13 arrows, 13 berries, 13 leaves on the wreath, like 13 levels of the pyramid, and then the all-seeing eyes of 13. Like everything is 13. Friday the 13th, when they crucified and killed all the Christians during the Crusades. Like, it was Christianity that did that. They were killing all the Gnostic people and removing all the information, proving they stole it. They were trying to create a narrative that they can control. If you don't remove all these ancient pagan people that basically worship the trees as gods, worship the earth as gods, worship another being as another god, you have to remove all that in order to instill fear to the population. Because if you don't have the population believing that you are God, and if you do not do what God says, you will be punished. You will burn in the fires of hell for eternity. Like, most people think the infinity sign, they think that's forever. That's misinformation. No. Okay, that's misinformation. Infinity is a specific set of time. Imagine, here's the measurement of infinity here, then here's a measurement of infinity next to it, then here's a measurement of infinity next to it. It's kind of like an eon. It's a specific set of time that's in a loop. It's not forever. Forever would imply a linear type of thing. But if you imagine that's what we are, we're in a loop in this matrix. So you'll see the rise and fall and empires all happen at the same time. Every time we have these alignments, check in history what was going on when we had all these major alignments. You'll see the rise and fall cyclically, time after time after time. It's in the records of the earth. If you drill core samples in Antarctica, it all says the same thing over and over and over again.
And in 13 we were taught was like a bad number, and I even remember one of my favorite sci-fi shows takes place in space, and it's far off, and they're trying to find
You're talking about Expanse?
I'm sorry?
What show are you talking about?
Battlestar Galactica, the original one.
Yeah.
And they're like,
That's
yeah,
interesting information about movie costumes. I told you about my movie costume collection. I'll tell you a story about some Cylons in a minute.
Well, what I find interesting is we have the 12 tribes that the survivors go, we need to find the 13th race, which was humanity. Their lost brothers that went out in space and colonized the earth. And I was like, and I always thought that was interesting how they said that and scripted it. But then the new version came out, and the final episode of that one is like where they take that story and bring it in, and they're like, there's the Cylon and the Doctor are walking through history of the earth and saying, yeah, this was our creation. We did this. And it was like, dude, they're like literally telling us we came from the stars and we were created here.
It's kind of like the Noah's Ark going to the Christian story. If you read the Atrahasis, he was known as different names. He was never known as Noah. Like in all the records we ever found in Sumeria, there was no records of Noah. And once you link him to Enki, the story starts making more sense. And I believe that I don't think it was a boat. Like, they had space traveling technologies, man. I don't think it was as rudimentary as a wooden boat. And the whole story about them marching a pair of the animals from all across the earth, male and female, I believe that they stored genetic databases there. They stored the DNA of all those pairs of animals, and they couldn't explain that to a race of people that they kind of co-created. Someone asked me this question earlier. Is the Anunnaki fully responsible for creating humans? Hell no. They are only responsible from what we became 200,000 years ago. there was all these other genetic programs going on before the Anunnaki arrived here. Because technically this planet has been owned by the Draco for a long time, and the praying mantids had a lot of investment in genetic engineering in humans. Like, a lot of people don't talk about the mantids' connection to all this. And they're heavily used in the programs, in the secret space program. Like, a lot of the mantids are our teachers. They have them in the deep underground military bases. They are extremely psionic. And you're told whenever you go in battle with any of these beings, or if you go to Mars and you ever have to go up against any mantid, they tell you off the bat, do not fight telepathically to a mantid, because they can rip through your head damn near, and you can't take it. So if they're going to interrogate you through your mind, you have to let it happen. You cannot fight them. Psionically, they can kill you that way.
Right. Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And I even have memories, and I always thought they were past life memories, and they may be, but I'm learning I'm, through the programs as well, and I'm on the cusp of unlocking memories. And so I don't have many, but I have this memory, like, you were saying there was before the Anunnaki, the Dracos, and I even have memories of felines and avians, roaming the earth and cultivating the earth, and having one earth destroyed, another earth. They were like, no, this isn't working out, so they destroyed it, and we're like the third rendition of an earth.
Hopi Indians said that too. I think they said we're in number 3. I think they said it's the 4th earth. So we've had 4 earths rise and fall, and these cyclical events that keep happening, like kind of like we have some kind of pole flip every, it's estimated 12.8 to 13.2 thousand years. We hit this midway point in the precession of the equinox, and that energy kind of flips the poles. Everybody keeps saying an asteroid hit it. Like, if you see the actual, if you take core samples, you're going to see, if you keep drilling and drilling and drilling, that this keeps happening over and over and over. You keep seeing these cyclical pole shift flips, and you keep seeing plate subduction, where basically, imagine New York and its skyscrapers. Plate subduction is when it actually flips upside down, and then this mass up here is this new mountain range. And after we come out of this flood from these tectonic shifts flipping on each other and all this magnetic energy, it's basically like a blast of water. When you flip poles like that, the plate subduction, like, it tilts the planet. So when you tilt the planet, that water has to start going somewhere en masse. So I don't believe that Yahweh sent the flood. I believe they knew it was coming. They've been here long enough to have mapped the stars, because remember, they designed astronomy and astrology, writing, poetry, acting, language. It was all created with the Anunnaki. But keep in mind, millions of years ago, there was still genetic programs going on this planet. And we had this super planet that exploded, right? The Maldek Tiamat planet that's located between Mars and Jupiter. When that planet exploded, Mars was a moon of that big ASS planet. And so was Ceres. They were 2 moons of Tiamat. Now it's called the asteroid belt. And Ceres, where Tony Rodriguez served, he served between Jupiter and Mars in the asteroid belt, and that's where Ceres colony is. Right in the center of that, man. It's not very far away, so that's so cool, man.
It is, and it's interesting, like, you talk about how Tiamat was like the largest planet. Now Jupiter's the largest planet. And I always find it interesting to watch NASA and what they're doing, because as we started talking about the legends of the 13th planet coming into the solar system, or not the 13th, the 10th planet coming into the solar system, what does NASA do? Oh, we're knocking a planet off the list. So now we have 8 planets. So when the 10th planet arrives, nope, that's the number 9. So we're still waiting for the 10th planet. I'm like, when I saw that, I was like, I don't think it works that way, guys. I don't think you get to rearrange the cosmic order.
Exactly. Like saying Pluto's no longer a planetoid. It's more of a moon. So what I was saying about when Maldek exploded, Earth technically wasn't the third rock from the sun. Earth actually wasn't here when that big ASS planet exploded. This Earth we're on is part of Tiamat. So her waters of that planet, her bones, her body, that's what they're talking about in the Sumerian tablets when they took her bones and her body and her skin and we separated the sky and covered the sky. Like, you got to realize, man, this planet's directly connected to what happens. So the soul that is inhabited in this planet, the consciousness, the singular consciousness of this planet, it's holding the memories of what happened and how it exploded.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because as you were saying that, I started getting flashes of a memory of learning when I was younger that the Earth and Mars were one, and something hit it and it caused the split. And when the Earth got hit again, they said, oh, that's where the moon came from. And I was like, I don't think that's exactly how that works, but it's interesting how you're saying the waters of Tiamat came to the Earth. And I'm like, yeah, that explains why Mars's water is over here and how that developed. And the two planets are almost so alike. And we always had this desire of when we go into space, everyone's like, let's go to Mars. We got to go to Mars. It's like we feel like, yeah, it's our second home.
So when that planet exploded and Mars was a moon, that explosion caused Mars to lose its atmosphere. And most of the planet died damn near instantly because at that point when you lose your atmosphere, a lot of different things happens cataclysmically. You have electrical shifts. You have all kinds of stuff just open up because they didn't just crack a hole in their ozone layer. Like, you have to realize a lot of these moons, somehow they've set them up where they have atmospheres. So when this Maldek planet existed, it had its own atmosphere. These other planetoids, a lot of them have atmospheres because they produce. It's kind of like before the Anunnaki arrived, after the planet exploded. It's estimated that the moon arrived around 450,000 years ago out of nowhere. And the reason why they say that is because in the core samples, they see before around 450,000 years ago, it was mostly tropical around the entire planet, which means there was only one temperature all throughout the planet. And then suddenly the moon comes, it has a tidal lock onto the core of the planet, which is not solid. We've been lied to. In the programs, we know that there's an internal sun inside all the planets, and it's part of the torus field. Everybody knows that the Earth is a torus. You can't have a solid core in the center of a torus. It's not possible. I believe it's kind of like the emanating portal for this planet. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm kind of wondering, does that kind of make our planets more like the moon and the moons more like Dyson spheres that science is starting to discover, where it's star instead of a object?
Okay, so what they described the moon in the different Sumerian tablets. They basically said it was a hollowed out planetoid that was retrofitted, and it was kind of like an arc, like an actual arc. So every moon, every planet in the cosmos spins. That's how it works. It spins. The moon, our moon, is the only moon that is known that does not spin by itself, and then it rotates fixed around a planetoid. That lets you know there's technology involved because it's not possible according to our model of physics. It's not possible. If they were to move the moon 500 more miles away, it would start affecting our magnetic field. It can cause all kinds of changes on this planet. They are literally in the exact spot I mean, that moon's like 2,160 miles around. Like, each age of the zodiac is 2,160 years, part of the precession of the equinox. So think about the mathematics involved to create a planetoid that you encode that geometry in exact miles. And then you build pyramids where you code that geometry in the pyramids as well. Like the coordinates of the pyramids is the speed of light. They were telling us how to leave the planet. That's one of the biggest Freemasonry teachings is secret to space travel.
Okay, and that kind of makes sense too, because as we're spinning and moving, I remember, and you probably seen it too, where you could look up in the sky and there'd be a straight line, and you would say to somebody, "What is that?" And they go, "Oh, that's the Milky Way galaxy." And in my mind, I was like, "Wait a minute, we're in the Milky Way galaxy, so there's no way I could see it from point A to point B, straight across the night sky, because we would have to be at some point in it, because we're in that galaxy." And it's when I started going, wait a minute. Well, I don't think we're in the Milky Way galaxy then anymore, and we must go into another galaxy, because physics tells you, and science tells you, you can't see a straight line within that line. You're either going to see the left or the right.
Which means that all this is a holographic projection in general, because if you think about it, we're surrounded by ones and zeros. They say that God wrote his signature in everything, and we find it in ones and zeros, right? They teach us this in school. That's telling you this is a holographic computer program.
Right, and the
And
moon
then the only
is
thing
now
inside
visible.
this is only electrical energy. That is it.
Yeah, and I find proof of the Matrix too in the fact that, talking about the moon, I have strong memories of going through school, elementary school, and they were like, the moon rises at night and the sun sets, and then how you know it's daytime is the moon disappears and sets and the sun is up. And I will be walking outside and I look up and I'm like, there's the moon right there. And I'm like, wait a minute. How can the moon be up in its daytime, middle afternoon?
That's a tricky question, because I think there's a Mandela effect going around where I don't remember seeing the moon throughout my childhood either, and I remember you had to see it only in the nighttime. And then suddenly I realized one day, I'm like, I don't remember being able to see the moon growing up. I thought you can only see it at night. So the fact that we can see it in the daytime, it's either a Mandela effect or we're on a completely different timeline, and that's the Mandela effect, and no one's ever physically said that. Like, no one's ever even mentioned it before. But that's the kind of stuff I study, these variations in the Matrix, because the timeline I'm from, this is not my timeline. All these Mandela effects here, and I feel like I'm in the land of the movie Idiocracy. I feel like we're dumbing down and we're not fighting against the government anymore, and we're all drinking the fluoride, and we're all just layering on the freaking nacho cheese of dissociation, and like we distract ourselves with entertainment, and that's all we do, and we realize we're just missing life. Like, if I ever had to raise kids, I would not raise them on a tablet. Because It's like you realize they miss life. You miss life with your child. They don't experience nothing. And like, unfortunately, all my kids were taken away from me in the programs. And I'm recalling this with my memories now, and I got to actually meet my trauma twin, and I uncovered a lot of information that connected a lot of dots. And to have all your kids stolen in a singular lifetime, that freaking sucks, man. And like, I always knew as an adult that I couldn't have a child, even though I wanted a child so bad, because I knew if I had a child, they always told me they would abduct that child and put it in the programs. So it's kind of like, I would love to be a parent, but then they've always promised to abduct my child even again. So it's like, it freaking sucks. It's so depressing an idea. I even forgot what we were talking about because that's freaking depressing to remember. Oh yeah, tablets. I would raise my kids on experience. I would teach them life skills. I would teach them what YouTube is. And no, not distraction YouTube. How to YouTube. How to build an IKEA shelf. How to replace an alternator. How to. YouTube is the new college. And smart people use it as a learning tool. Anything I want to learn to build, I go to YouTube. It freaking shows me step by step and even tells you the problems that you're going to run into from the dumb shits that actually did all the problems. You're like, you know what? I'm glad he made that mistake because at step 13, I'm going to jack all that up and I was going to do it just like he did. I was going to remove that part like I thought he was doing and then it caused all the problems. Yeah. Treat it as a college, man. You know?
Yeah, and my other favorite with YouTube is they're like, yeah, so when you do it, you do this motion. And you're like, okay, so hold on, let me get the object into that. And then they flip it. They're like, yeah, because it's easier. And you're like, why didn't you start that way? Why am I going and flipping when you could have just said, yeah, set it this way because you can grip it better and open it this way. And it's like, yeah, and like we have shower filters and you have to turn it a certain way. And if you turn it the wrong way, it makes it tighter. And so it's like you got to really fight it and you can't really use tools. You got to use muscle. And it's like I'm always watching to the right where they're opening and going, okay, it's this way and I got to turn it. And it's like, I'm like, oh, there it is. Got it.
That was reminding me, I think we've gone through such a moment of de-evolution as a humanity that we have trouble even reading IKEA directions. Like even those directions are confusing, and that's what the world has become has turned into. Because remember how you used to buy furniture and bicycles and like they came assembled. You didn't have to build all this crap yourself. And it's just like, when did products become you build it? Like, didn't I pay you all that expensive money to build this? Yeah. Like, why are you skipping the build process and charging 3 times as much it would be as if it was built? Like, it makes no sense. It's kind of like the organic versus pesticide produce kind of argument where they say produce is more I just lost my train of thought. I had a comparison. What did I say right before that?
Produce being versus the organics, because they would, my understanding was they're like, yeah, you can spend more for the organic, but there's no guarantee it's organic because you don't know how the water is flowing from or the wind is blowing from the farm next to it. And if they're not organic, it's mixing in. So are you really getting organic?
Yeah, I forgot my initial point. That's part of my traumatic brain injury. Sometimes I might preload a subject in order to build the knowledge in order for you to understand my point. And a lot of the times, I even say this during a presentation. If I literally trail off and then I'm like, what was I talking about? Just remind me. And I'm going to find the point in which I left off. And it's like, I will continue as if I didn't stop. But sometimes, all the time, I'll talk, I'll describe something, I'll compare something, and I'm like, I'm thinking about organic produce. What the hell was I talking about, man?
You were talking about the cost of produce, organic. And
yeah, but it was right before that. It was what we were talking about right before that. That was the ultimate point of the produce. But yeah, stupid. Oh yeah, they punish you. So an alternative meat, fake meat, plant-based meat comes in like this ultimate fried chicken patties, right? You'll get 6 patties and it's like $10. Or you'll get some vegetarian hot dogs and you'll get a pack of 4 for like $7. It's just like they're penalizing us for choosing to eat healthier, and they're not even giving us what we're paying for. Because if there's no meat in it, technically, don't they say that's the main reason it's so expensive, because of the meat, because of supply and all that? Let's remove all that crap. No more excuses, and it's all plant-based. Plants growing everywhere. How the hell is it 3 times more? Like they're
Well,
penalizing us.
yeah, and unfortunately nowadays, like, you can't even trust plant-based because they might be bioengineering some part of it, and so it's like, yeah, they're really making it really hard to find any food that is pure anymore.
Even the meats, man, it's cut with so much stuff. Like every time they do a DNA test to see what's truly in the meats of the restaurants, they find a ton of sketchy DNA in it, including human DNA. And
Yep.
when people read that, they're like, human DNA. They got fingernails and hair in it? No. Human flesh DNA. Pieces of humans. If you don't believe me, just look it up right now and get off Google. Stop Googling stuff. They control everything. Use DuckDuckGo. Get an alternative search engine. If you claim that you're awakened and you're still using freaking Google, you're the freaking problem. And if you truly don't know how much Google spies on you and controls everything you search for, if you're looking for something that's so important, they're going to put it 1,236 pages into your search and then prioritize everything on page 1 of who's paying for them to be on that advertising in the first listing. So, like, you can't truly discover anything on Google, man. Like I tattoo. I tattoo full-time in Tampa. People always are bringing me Google photos of tattoos. And they're like, can you do something like this? I'm like, you found out on Google, didn't you? It's always crap. They know. Stop using Google searches. Like, look at Pinterest. Pinterest is one of the most amazing websites that exist. Anything that you can nerd out on, you could find awesome stuff on Pinterest for it. And you're thinking, I'm a guy. I have tattoos. Isn't Pinterest for chicks? No, dude. Get on Pinterest. Once you're on it, you'll be like, oh my God, look at all these build ideas and like awesome quality photos for everything I'm into. And like, oh my God, I love Pinterest. And I can like create stuff and folders and like how to build custom stuff folders. Like everything's there. You can find the most amazing tattoo photos and reference art just on freaking Pinterest. So get off Google. That's my point. Stop using Google.
Yeah. I'm not on Google, but I wasn't on Pinterest either. But I'll definitely look into that. Lauren has a comment for you to think about when you were talking about with your kids, you know, being abducted and put in the program. She says, don't let the fear control your motives. Maybe your child would be the super soldier to change everything for the better.
Yeah, I know, but just realize that if they're put in those programs, they are raped every day. They are beaten to death.
It is horrible.
Every day. They are mind fractured and destroyed till the core person is gone, until they come out of a cocoon, just like they say in Monarch programming, MK Ultra. They beat you to a pulp where you no longer have identity, you no longer who you are, and whatever comes out of the cocoon is the product of the programming. That's why they chose the Monarch butterfly. They found out that the Monarch butterfly passes its memories to its offspring. So the MK Ultra programmers, they realized humans are like that. They actually go after certain genetic lines that have dissociation, schizophrenia, stuff like that, trauma built into the bloodline. And those are the most programmable people. And that's why we incarnate into these lives. We have to choose very specific bloodlines. Like, I always thought that when I came here that I was abducted by the government, and it's always been against my will. It took me later on in my life to get into QHHT to realize I signed up to go through the most traumatic programs on this planet before I got here in order to uncover this, in order to bring this information back, because this matrix, this planet got so out of control, so enslaved, so overtly, that different factions have been coming down throughout time to try to restabilize this stuff, and it basically caused all these Mandela effects, because when the secret space program was created, they discovered time travel. And when they discovered time travel, they started messing stuff up big time. Like, it's not just we're going to space and discovering, we're going back in time to kill people that were like dictators, or people that would be like Nikola Tesla. Like, we go back and they're changing history, and they did it so many times. All these Mandela effects started happening, and people argue. Nelson Mandela died. I watched him, and Nelson Mandela lived, and he became president of Africa. Where I'm from, Nelson Mandela became president of Africa. I'm not saying a country in Africa. I'm saying like president of Africa, because he inspired everybody, and it was almost like, it's kind of like Putin. He's been president for a long time. I guess they're past the electoral process. It's kind of like if Trump won, if he actually won again and he became our president for this next term, which would technically be his third term. I believe everything that got messed up so bad, Trump would lock himself in as almost a lifetime president of the United States, because people don't want all this stuff that's happening with the World Economic Forum and how they are overtly trying to tell us they're going to take away all of our property. We're all going to basically live in these 15-minute cities. We're all going to be happy. Yeah, we're going to be happy because they are going to be programming us to be happy. They are going to giving us so many chemicals. It's going to be in our water. It's going to be everywhere, like in the movie Equilibrium. And it's almost like you got to stop taking the pills just to wake up. But that's where we're headed, man. And like, this is why we're here to uncover all this. It got out of control, and these ETs are coming down. They're risking their lives. They're crashing their ships so people will wake up. I just did a CE5 contact this weekend at St. Pete Beach at Treasure Island with a group of around 30 people. And we seen like 15 or 20 ships in the sky, and everybody saw them. Everybody. I have photos, videos. People were using green lasers, and I was teaching people how to actually bring them in and how to have them respond, how to cause them to flash their lights, and to show them that they're conscious. These are conscious beings. They're not just people in spaceships. Like most crafts, you don't see them light up. You know, they're using a type of technology where it bends light. So you're not going to see them. It's kind of like the technology in the programs with like TR3Bs. They're basically bending light. So it can be right there in front of you in the sky and you can't even see it. And they can bend light so good that they can even project themselves as an airplane. They can turn themselves into a helicopter. It's all projection. It's not actually shape-shifting. It's projecting itself to look like that to us because they're manipulating the frequencies of light.
Right. And going back to like, you know, how memories, you know, like are bleeding in and, you know, all these effects that are happening to us. I find myself when I'm driving, and I don't know about you, but when I start to like, if I'm on a trip long enough or if I'm on a routine trip, I'll kind of zone a little bit to where I'm driving, but I'm like thinking about other stuff while driving. And I'll watch my hand and like, it'll be like this on the gear shift. And when I want to accelerate, I'll tilt it forward. When I need to brake, I'll tilt it back. When I need to turn, I'll turn my hand on the gear shift, whichever way I need to turn. And it's like, and in my mind, I'm visually seeing it moving like a spacecraft going through what, you know, whatever, you know, area I'm in. But it always amazes me how, as much as I'm doing that, the vehicle stays within the lane unless I'm literally changing lanes, and I'm not weaving all over. It's like the car will stay straight, but my mind is picturing it going these different ways.
That's because you were in an altered state. Science proved that humans go into an altered state within 60 seconds. You turn on a TV program. Why do you think they call it a program? I've got to watch my programs because I'm being programmed. Think about it that way. I just lost my train of thought again. What were we talking about?
I was talking about being
oh, yeah, so you were into alpha. So science proves that within 60 seconds, the human brain goes from beta to alpha. So when you're driving and you feel that spaceship stuff, everything else is kind of disappearing. You might lose all the landmarks, and you say, how did I not crash my car? I'm like, 3 cities away from where I remember I was last time. What the hell? You snap into it, you're like, whoa, how am I here? It's like we're going into altered states all day long, and that's what you find out when you're really good at something, when you're really passionate about something. We were talking earlier about how people never truly find their passion. That means that is torture. They stay in beta all day long. That means the conversation we're having now. Like you're aware of the sounds in the room, the sounds outside of the room, the distractions, the clicks, the sounds, the blowing of the AC. Like that's beta. We go through most of our life in beta, where we truly don't pay attention. Well, I can't say we spend most of our life. I believe we spend most of our life in daydreams. And daydreams is alpha. You go to some made-up world in your mind or a scenario, and you snap out of it, and then 13 minutes went by in 1 minute. You're like, wow. Because there's no perception of time. And earlier you mentioned you think you're in the programs in like a past life. Understand there's no true past lives technically don't exist. All of your lives you're living right now simultaneously. All of them. So we only say past because we think time is linear from point A to point B, which that would mean that the amount of time I go from here to here, it's measured in a unit of time. So right now I'm in Egypt in the Temple of Edfu as a bloodline-born priest, as a record keeper. I am there right now. Right now, I am fighting in the Orion Wars. Right now, I'm an Alpha Draconian general on the bad guy side. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are my experiences in my past lives. I'm also Andromedan right now. So what I've done with a lot of these lives is I've incarnated on both sides to take the totality of the duality to understand light and dark. Because if you only live light lives, you truly will never understand the antithesis of total energy of light and dark, the male and female, masculine and feminine, left and right. So in these other lives, we're male, we're female. There's no such thing as you having a ton of incarnations and you're only a male in every one. That's not possible. Yeah. They would not let that happen because you have to evolve as a being. You have to be the grandmother, then you have to be the grandchild. You play the mother, you play the child back and forth. So you experience everything in every one. So like, I'm not always white in my lives. I've been black in other incarnations. So we're not a product of our past, in our history, and slavery that links us genetically to only one color. We are not that. We do not just incarnate, like again, the eye analogy where we don't have the same eyes. We don't have the same stature and height. All of it changes. We're extraterrestrials. We're shown life as grass, as the wind, as kittens, as a tree, as an alien, as Michael and Drago now. Everything is us, and we are all. So you really can't evolve unless you experience both sides of duality.
Right, and that makes sense because, like, in the summertime, I will go and I'll kind of stand and just kind of move, like walking wise, a little small bit in water in the pools because right now in this life, if I put my ears underwater for too long, they fill up with wax and I have to do a lot of candles to get the wax out of there so I can hear and everything's not muffled. And so it's like I make the conscious choice. Okay, I'm not putting my head underwater so I can keep my hearing as perfect as it is right now. But at the same token, like lately, I started finding myself moving the water like Tai Chi style. And I'd make a motion like this, and I'd look at the water, and it's like, for like a split second, it looks like it's perfectly smooth like a tabletop, but there's all these little movements within it, but they're not generating waves, and I'm like, that's interesting. Then I'll make another movement, and I'm like, okay, it's not as smooth. But at the same token, I've seen to where if I really push my arm mostly under the water with my hand on. I can move like leaves and debris that's coming, change its course. But if I go just gently, they'll actually come towards me faster. So I notice how the water is reacting to what I'm doing. And I also start to wonder, am I becoming so to where I'm absorbing everything around me, not realizing it, that I'm creating like what science would call a black hole in this moment? Because why all of a sudden is everything flowing towards me in the water, not the people, just what's floating in the water when I'm making movements away from me?
Because in that moment, you truly believed in the flow of energy. And at that point, your creative consciousness connected to the quantum field, which is basically like, imagine it like a grid, like black and white grid, right? And if you understand, the space directly in front of your face is not empty. It's all connected, particle by particle, Planck unit by Planck unit. Imagine that they're all holding hands at all times, and that's what our body is. It's a bunch of particles holding hands, only pretending to be Drago. But I'm not solid. No particle is solid. Science says that everything is 99.99999999993 empty space. So that means nothing's physical. So think about that. So if you realize if your hand's above the water and then the water is starting to react to you, water's conscious. And remember, you have that push of energy on the quantum field. You're creating like a gravity well. It's like a bend in time and space. You're pushing the fabric, even though you're not touching that water and there's space above the water in your hand. Your intention of believing in the magic, like the never ending story. You didn't lose the magic. People who like move energy and it's like kata like, we're feeling it in our body because we are literally moving these energies, and it's like martial arts. It's like you feel it in your body. And the water, since the water's conscious water remembers everything. So not only are you interact with the quantum field, the water is the quantum field. You are the quantum field. So if you push on it and you truly believe, it truly reacts. And that's where you get into like metaphysics and like quantum mechanics, quantum physics, because it's proving that the science we're taught is a lie. And there's a classified science that they teach in the secret space program that is going outside of relativity. And I've always known since a kid that Einstein was wrong and that he got some parts of his equation wrong. I don't know how I knew that as a kid, and everybody would call me dumb. That's like, you're questioning Einstein. I'm like, it's not right. His relativity is wrong. It's an incomplete model. And we find out in the secret space program that it was an incomplete model. And that's why it's relative. Relativity, it's like, it's relative to position and in which consciousness reacts to the stimulus around it. So that's why time doesn't exist, because if you take 100 people that witness an event, every single person will experience that event in a different amount of time. And they say it all happened in 3 minutes, but it could have happened within an hour. But the time lapse that you had is kind of like when you go through trauma, you start going into slow motion. And when you're in a slow motion, it seems like the event is taking a very long time. But that entire event could have taken 1 minute and 37 seconds. But
So
in relativity, since it was relative, that's what relativity really is. So when they actually unveil the classified stuff, it's going to change everything.
right, and that brings up an interesting question that I've often been puzzled about. Is I was brought up with my parents giving us the freedom of our faith and beliefs and everything. It's, as long as we weren't going out and killing anybody, we were okay to, believe what we wanted. And so I never got really the dogma to the point to where I would fall asleep in a church when the priest would give his sermon, which is the dogma part. And when he was done, I'd wake back up. But I never got the dogma, and I was raised more metaphysical. And so there would be times where my parents would be telling a story before I was born, And I would answer and fill in some of the story, and they're like, how did you know that? You weren't even, technically, I wasn't even a concept yet. I wasn't even conceived yet, and I knew things, and I would laugh and say, well, I was floating. Could that be in that moment I was accessing the quantum realm, and that's why I could remember things before I was born?
Yeah, because that's literally what you did. Like when I put someone under with QHHT hypnosis, they're basically time traveling with the Akashic records. So if you can imagine, again, since time is not linear, you can imagine that Michael is going through childhood right now. Michael's also in high school. Michael has not started his podcast yet. Michael has in that shitty job that defined his life for a big period of time. You're still in that job. That's why we think that time is a thing, because we allegedly have these memories of all that happening from point A to point B. Grow, 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 grow. It's not how it works. Like, you're being born at this exact moment, but your consciousness is only focused on this time and this space of this part of your evolution. So remember, they say if we take the telescopes and we start looking into different star systems from our Hubble and the James Webb telescope and all that, and they say if you look so far that you can see the Big Bang starting, right? And if you look so far, you can see dinosaurs living right now. That means that the dinosaurs are still existing right now, that the beginning of this alleged universe is happening right now. So is the end of this universe, and the end of this planet, and the beginning of this planet. Everything happens simultaneously, but only a part of the spark of your consciousness is focused on this singular life in this time and this space. And it's that complicated.
That puts a new twist on the Native American legend about the two wolves. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, exactly. It's what you choose to be. That's the timeline. Because you're both. You're both the killer and the one that freed the animal and decided not to kill it. It's basically, it gets into the double slit theory and like the cat in the box theory, where the cat is both alive and dead, because both timelines have to exist, period. And they found that out. You take 100 people, they hit this button, it releases this machine, activates a hammer that hits a piece of glass, cyanide is released, the cat dies. The person opens it, there's either going to be a dead cat or an alive cat. They found out that the cat was both dead and alive at the same time, depending on who was viewing it, according to relativity. So our science is measured on the theory of everything that we can observe. Planetoids, space, stars, the big stuff in life. I specialize mainly in quantum physics and quantum mechanics, the stuff we can't observe. When you go down to the particle size, you realize that the particle is a universe within itself. You go down even farther into the fractal, you start discovering these other densities and other existences that exist within itself, like a rushing nesting doll, infinitely going down, just down and down and down. And then you realize, how can all this be real? If you understand that premise of what quantum physics and mechanics is really teaching you, it shows that we're only focusing on a single layer of an onion at this time, but the universe and the multiverse is infinite layers. So you are all timelines. You are every being. You are your enemy. You are your cat. Because there's only one consciousness that exists that split itself into individual units to understand what it actually is.
Yeah, and I had an experience growing up that I feel like it goes along with this and kind of is making sense of it. Is we had a bird growing up that was a pet, passed away, so we put it in a shoebox, buried it in our garden, and a few months later, we forgot that the bird was there, and we dug up the shoebox and we were like, what is this box? And we opened it up and there was absolutely nothing in it. And then we were like, wait a minute, wasn't there a bird in here that had passed away? And we're like, there was no bones, no dust, no dirt. It was like totally as if nothing had ever existed in there. And I'm thinking now, as you're saying with the quantum time of everything, time is always in motion and not in a straight line, that
It's a wave.
the bird went off to another existence and therefore did not exist in that box.
It was alive and dead at the same time. It was here and there at the same moment. It's kind of like you ever drive in the city or somewhere you're from and you revisit a place or a building disappears out of nowhere. Like you might go on a flight for a week and then you come back to your city and you figure out an entire place is damn near started to be built or is already almost built or built out of nowhere. And it's not possible. You're like, I've been driving past that place, I don't know how long, and that building was not there last week. It just appears out of nowhere. Buildings will appear and disappear. And that's truly what this really is. It's kind of like, you understand what the premise of a Matrix. So, like in the movie Star Wars, everybody knows that Luke said, Luke, I am your father, right? In this timeline we're in, he never freaking said that. It says, no, I am your father. But all the parody movies, all the In Living Color movies, everything that's ever been made to make fun of that movie are like saying it in the fan, Luke, I am your father. And the freaking, the fan will change your voice. How do all those exist? But if you look at any VHS tape of Star Wars, of that movie, if you look at any DVDs, any Blu-rays, any streaming, it does not exist in that way at all. It's as if a computer programmer hit remove this and change it, kind of like Sex in the City. Where I'm from, it was called Sex in the City, not Sex and the City. That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
You're like, it's never been and the city. It's about a bunch of horny women doing stupid stuff in the city, not including. It's kind of like saying 3 women and a car, 3 women and a population. It doesn't make sense. There's no context. Same with the Forrest Gump movie. Another Mandela effect was he said life is like a box of chocolates. He never said that. It is now life was like a box of chocolates. That statement no longer makes sense. It's almost an oxymoron. You can't exist with those words. You can't say life was like a box of chocolates. You're comparing it to chocolate. If it used to be that way, the analogy no longer works. So there's all these Mandela effects. So either we're in a computer program and someone hit enter and they deleted all evidence of Luke, I am your father in a single update, like a software update. Click. Luke, I'm your father's gone. Now it's no, I'm your father. Enter. Come on.
Yeah. My favorite Mandela that I came across when I was looking some up was the Fruit of the Loom, where a lady had a receipt with the cornucopia with the fruit, and it said Fruit of the Loom. And she said she was looking and there's no cornucopia. So she contacted the company and said, when did you stop using the cornucopia? And they go, we never used a cornucopia. I'm like, how? She's like, I have a receipt with the cornucopia. I'm like, yeah, how do you deny that when there's physical evidence even to going, wait a minute, we're totally in a matrix? Because
so I'm gonna blow your mind right now. The answer is both true and false according to relativity and the conscious observer. So everybody that exists within these Mandela effects, it is Berenstain Bears. It is Berenstein Bears. It is Febreze with Breeze. That's the timeline I'm from. And then suddenly out of nowhere, they took one of the E's out of Febreze and it became Febreze. For any of you that don't know that, anybody about Febreze, the word breeze has two E's in the center of it, and then out of nowhere, they took an E out, and a lot of people don't know that. And again, like you're saying about the woman, they contacted the company. When was this patent change made where they removed a letter? Because that requires a patent adjustment. And it's like a logo. You have to make you have to file for that change. There was no change ever made publicly. So again, all these Mandela effects, everyone that everybody experienced, it is true. It happened that way. And we're all arguing how it happened when we're all correct. We're just all thrown in this melting pot of all these timelines and scenarios because everything got out of control with the timelines. But that's what it is. That is what the Mandela effect is. Everybody's right. No one's wrong.
And my friend Alex, he likes to say the reason the Mandela effects are becoming more aware and more prevalent too is we are a multi-timeline generation and species that we're pulling all of them in to create one timeline. And so some features are overriding others aren't, and that's where more and more of these Mandela effects are coming from. And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, I can't argue that because, yeah, it's like, I mean, even like you're saying, in this timeline, in this existence, this is right. But now I'm over here where that's wrong. But when I bring that over, it's like, how do you determine which was the right and which is the wrong?
It's only about perspective at that point from being on the adjacent side. So both sides will argue with each other what they're looking at. They're like, no, MFer, that's a 6 in front of me on the ground. And the guy across from us is like, no, MFer, that's a 9. It's all about perception. It's kind of like when you're space. How do you know what direction is up? It's how you orient yourself in space. That is up. But to the person on the other side of the ship or another ship next to you, they're facing downwards. So you're both arguing about what side's up when it's only about perspective. What position are you viewing it from? They say that a tree can't fall in nature without having an observer. They're not realizing the tree is conscious. It is its own observer, and so are the trees around it. So it doesn't require a human observer. It requires consciousness to observe itself.
Yeah. And another point too, like as we're talking about space and perspective, is I always find it comical and I will laugh in movies when the pilot's in space and they're like, yeah, you need to go 3 degrees to your right. And I'm like, well, where's 0? How do you determine 3 degrees? Going, oh, there's the target. It's like, wait a minute. The way you're saying it doesn't make sense because you're saying, oh, I was on the 0 point to go 3 degrees. It's like, wait, that doesn't make sense because how do you know where 0 point is?
Well, see, the only way it would make sense from a space-based perspective is that they have already mapped the stars and their computer systems have already mapped the stars and their AI has already told them what side technically is up in a way, right? So 3 degrees would show you 3 degrees to this direction according to your star map. You're going to hit a little bit closer to the Andromeda side. But just 3 degrees more, you're going to skip that entire galaxy. So if you've mapped it, 3 degrees completely makes sense because, again, you've made a measurement of distance and or orientation. Therefore, you have to have a mathematical observation in order to make that adjustment in space, or you're just guessing. So even 3 degree tilt or 3 degrees off to the left, all that matters in straight trajectories. But like true space travel, we're not going to point A, point B. If like we travel from Mars with the alleged space program we have, they're like, it'll take all these light years to get to Mars or like Pluto or like no, man, we don't do straight lines on the programs. We hop in different pockets and portals. Like we don't use that stuff. rocket-powered science is antiquated for the slave race. Like, NASA is a circus for the population, and they truly don't do real space travel. It's a theatrical agency. That's why the word NASA in Hebrew means to deceive in Hebrew.
I
You
didn't
know,
know that.
like even NASA, it was started in 1958 by the freaking Nazis, man. It was the Nazis' rockets from Werner von Braun, which was an SS top rank person. Everybody's like, oh, Werner von Braun, he was such a good guy, and Carol Rosin was his friend, and he did so much for the earth. And like, no, he got caught. World War II happened. Operation Paperclip happened. He was installed over here. We used his rocket program when he created the V2 rockets. He designed the first intercontinental ballistic missile. You can put a warhead on his missile, shoot it up into space, and hit any continent on the planet, and they would not even see it coming. The Nazis designed that.
Amongst
The
a lot of
Nazis
other
designed our Apollo program where we went to the moon. They designed all of our rockets. So, like, there's a lot of history, like the public, that they truly don't know what's going on. And only people that's heard of Operation Paperclip or Operation High Jump really knows what the truth really is. Like, look how Laura Eisenhower is connected. Like, her great-grandfather was directly fighting these mechanisms and MJ-12 and, like, these agreements that were made during Truman's times and the extraterrestrials and the flyover the Capitol building of 1952 where the Germans were threatening us for, like, unconditional surrender. And it was captured on TV in black and white. Everybody thought it was aliens. It was the freaking Germans in reverse engineered craft threatening the United States. Like, there's so much the population doesn't know about, and like, you truly will never know unless you get off YouTube videos, man. Like, every time people, they like to fact check my Anunnaki knowledge. And every time I get fact check, it's people that got their knowledge from freaking YouTube. You know what I'm saying? And it's always from a singular source. It's always from Sitchins. Every time. It's from the Book of Enki or something from Zachariah Sitchins wrote, man. I'm like, Zachariah Sitchins didn't read the freaking Sumerian tablets, man. Like, he wasn't the main author or the person that deciphered these tablets in the first place. It was people that was way older than him that already died. Like, I tell everybody about the Assyriologists Stephanie Dowley and George Smith. They're the ones that cracked the freaking codes of the Anunnaki, and it was Sitchins deriving their interpretations for stuff he couldn't figure out. So, like, there's so much on this planet we've got to learn, and, like, I can spend an entire lifetime in the pursuit of knowledge, and I won't even get 0.0000 times 100.1 the amount of information that can be actually absorbed into a human body or a light body. It's just not possible. We're surrounded by so much information. A single person can't house that information. It's not possible.
Right. And that's the one thing that I thought, I don't know if you ever watched the Stargate SG-1 series, was when they downloaded the knowledge of the ancients, the body would start to fail because all the knowledge that's flowing through it and everything. And I always thought that was interesting how they would show it. And I've often wondered, is it because we don't utilize, as we're told we don't, the full aspect of our brain, or is it truly our brain is designed to hold maybe, say, 1 trillion gigabytes of data, and that information was like 100 trillion, so it really was causing the brain to slowly shut everything down because its processor needed more energy.
Well, I would say that the brain doesn't store most of our information in our memories. Our DNA does. So imagine we used to have 12-strand DNA. Imagine each layer of DNA. Imagine it Imagine an average human body with our 2-strand DNA can hold, let's just say, a magic number of 100,000 gigabytes of information, or like 5 terabytes of information. It's way more than that, right? It goes into the petabytes, what can be held in a single gram of DNA. So all the information is stored physically in the DNA. So our memories and stuff, the brain's more of a processing plant, and it stores certain complex information in energetic memory. You have to realize your body holds that memory too. It's cellular memory. You have memory stored in your light body. So all the lives you've ever lived, you have access to all that energy now, but it's blocked off due to our genetic engineering. Like when all these different programs modified us, imagine we started as pretty much gods, where we were telepathic, we can create with our minds, we could fly, we can do all these amazing things. And then suddenly they start removing each DNA, each strand of DNA, just remove to where a couple of DNA strands connected to some freaking hydrogen bonds. You know what I'm saying? Like a weak piece of frozen ice that's melting. There's no oak tree roots holding it anymore, and we're basically just a twig that was put in the ground, and we got to grow roots again. But we'll never become that magnificent oak tree because they removed part of our root system that will never ever grow again. So that's where we're going to discover everything through genetics. We're going to find that our junk DNA is the secret to everything. They're going to find all the genetic engineering and all that junk DNA. They're going to see everywhere we were engineered. Like the Anunnaki, they even left their signature in our DNA. Their signature is literally in our DNA where they edited it at. Like in chromosome number 2, where they put telomere caps, they put their signature of the DNA, of the cross. They put a cross as a signature in the DNA.
And I do find it funny how science and the genetic scientists are like, yeah, we have maybe 8, 12, 13 strands of DNA in the body, but we're double helix, so that's just junk. And everybody's like, well, yeah, okay, that's junk. I'm like, no, wait a minute. If it's in our body, it's got to serve a purpose.
Correct.
There's no junk put in us except for the thoughts that we allow in. And so it's like, it amazes me how people accept that. And another example of that, too, is, I'm sure you remember this, was, a decade ago? McDonald's came out and said, hey, we have 100% chicken tenders now. And everyone was so excited that there was 100% chicken. And I was like, so you guys stop to think about...
You're like, what was it before?
Yeah, you were told it was chicken before. Now it's 100% chicken. And you're like, this is the greatest thing. And I'm like, wait, what?
What the hell were we eating before all our whole life? Like, what?
What's this faux chicken?
And everybody knows what fillers is now. They're like pink slime in your burgers. It's like 80% pink slime. And then everybody thinks when they eat a hamburger, they're eating like a single part of a cow, but they don't realize they're probably eating like 500 or 600 cow pieces. And it's like just like 500, 600 cow pieces together in a patty. You know, that's kind of why I became vegetarian back in 2016. That's around 8 years ago. And I just couldn't, with what I was put through in the programs where I was trained as a Delta soldier. So I've been forced against my will to take life my entire life. And it's always got to me, and it's always messed me up on the inside because my root energy will not do that. And I would die for any being. Like, I save insects all the time. Like, it's crazy. If you know me as a friend, I put my life on the line for freaking stupid animals. But to me, they're not stupid. It's just like, that's me drowning in water as an insect or an ant. Or like, that's me as a dragonfly drowning in the water at this new place I went, and I almost had to fall into the water, deep water, just to save a single dragonfly. But I knew when I got to look into its eyes and I got to clean its wings off where it can fly again, we'll share a moment. And I knew I was the reason it gets to live another month. Like, these insects, their life are so short, man, that it reminds me of the genetic and engineering where we live to be 1,000 years old. Like in the Bible, they said Methuselah and everybody. Yeah, they cloned Chiron. Was a great movie, Lauren. Like just the amount of disclosure in that movie and how clones are so freaking real that if you are in a clone body, you cannot tell you're in a clone. Like, there are no moving parts. There are no mechanical parts. If, like, they clone my body, it is literally me in a clone body of myself. It's crazy. Like, to be in these programs and to be cloned and to do these super soldier shit that we get to put when we're put through, man, I'm not even convinced if this is even my real human body anymore, because, like, all the remote viewing we've done, they said this is my third body. All these remote viewers keep saying, like, this is not the body I was born with. So I'm like, am I a clone? And if I'm a clone, cloning is so advanced that a person would be convinced they are a human being, and they're not. And it's only their consciousness in their own replicated version of themselves. Like, when we die in battle in the programs or on some kind of mission or operation, our consciousness rehomes back to our actual body. So they show this in the movie Avatar. They basically show you that we humans, we get in this machine, it automatically forces us into Delta, which is REM sleep. And at that moment, we can transfer our consciousness immediately in a clone body. But like I said, the physical body, like if I was in a clone body, if I get hurt, it's like getting hurt in your human body. If you get a paper cut on your thumb in a clone body, it is as painful with the same exposed nerves, because there's no difference. It's that freaking freaky, man.
And I often wonder too, when there are times when, like, I'll be sitting and I'll get up, and all of a sudden I'll be like, man, my arm hurts right here. Like, you know, something hit me, but I've just been sitting in a chair, nothing's happened. I would always just be like, just shake it off and be like, whatever. But now, with what I know now, I gotta be thinking, you know, is one of my alters fighting? And I sensed an injury that it got.
Yeah, so exactly. Now you're understanding, you're connecting the dots and realizing that these programs you're in, they're happening at this moment now. Everything is happening right now. The beginning of time, the end of time, any perception you can ever have, it's all happening now. Yeah. And that's what that is. It's a bleed through. Like, that injury is coming through in your physical body. You wake up and there's all these bruises or something of what you might be. It's like an energetic imprint or overlay of something else that's happening in another facet of you, and it's bleeding through.
Interesting. And Lauren asked this a while ago, and I'll ask it now. She's asking, do you have a favorite book or books that you recommend for people to read?
I've often thought about what my favorite book was, and I don't know, man. Like, there's so many books that woke me up, man. Like, I think one of the most impactful books for me was The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which is basically is what used in the military, and it's military doctrine, and it was learned from other planets. Like, when Sun Tzu actually wrote all this military code and how to use basically like the Jedi Force, like the way Yoda talks, in order to move through an enemy, sometimes you must take a step back. You know what I'm saying? You know, it shows all this inverted philosophy, and I'm a philosopher. So, like, when I talk on these shows, I speak a lot of philosophy through analogy. And I would say philosophy is one of the biggest parts of me, and that really sums up who I am. But, like, I would probably say The Art of War.
Yeah, I would say The Art of War, and probably even Machiavelli's The Prince, because that was a blueprint for a lot of things too, especially in what we call the Dark and Renaissance age. Everybody in the families and bloodlines were reading that book, and that was like their guidebook.
Like, philosophy was one of the general things they made all the bloodline learn because those were the tactics to control everything. It shows you the psychological aspect and the physical aspect of control. It's like the art of power, the art of seduction, the law of everything. It's like there's an actual blueprint that is written in the tapestry of the universe, and it can be replicated. So like another favorite book would be Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. And like it's stuff like that. It makes me question my own life. I'll read a philosophy quote one time, and at that moment I'll read that quote and it'll apply to my life, and it'll change the way I view life from that point on. And I would say, if anything, I read philosophy the most. And that's why I always go existential into the left field, because it's like you can't truly describe what creation is without using philosophy, because you can't use the left brain model to basically summarize something that you think is real, because I believe it's cocky to say that you know the truth of everything, or that you have all the answers, or like when people make predictions. Oh, this is going to happen. I'm channeling. This is going to happen in 2026, and all this is going to. People treat these people as cults, like they're cult leaders. These freaking channelers, and like they always make these freaking predictions. And there's certain channelers that I don't approve of. I'm not going to say their names, and they basically charge like $15,000 just to speak at a show, $10,000 speaker fee. And it's like, you're such a freaking fraud. Like, you know, it's just like, how can you be such a being of light and you literally have a following so large that you're only doing this for the money? Like, shame on you, man. Like, that this is what's wrong with the world. And there's other people, they're acting as emissaries for like entire star lineages, and like they say if you question their narrative, not only you're wrong, they publicly attack you. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, my answers are truth and you're delusional. So if you try to challenge that narrative, it gets nasty. And those are the people you got to watch out for, because the ones that will fight to the death to prove to you they are right, they are disinformation, or they are delusional, or they are 100% prophesying what will happen word for word. And until those prophecies happen exactly the way they say, on those dates and those times, will I start believing you're channeling. But almost everybody who's a channeler that made predictions, nothing's ever came true. Mass arrests never happened. All this takedown of the cabal, I'm watching it happen. I'm not saying that's not happening. That is happening around the world more than we've ever had in the entire history. But like, people need to stop predicting what's going to happen, because remember, different timelines. Everything is relative and subjective. You can't tell 7 billion people that one moment's going to happen and this is how it's going to happen and everybody's going to experience it that way. That'll never happen, ever, because that is not how timelines work. It's what you signed up to experience. So in the end, if the cataclysm comes, if Judgment Day happens, if China invades the United States, and basically it turns into that movie that Obama produced on Netflix, where the barge crashes in, and then everything that happened in the movie happens in real life, like predictive programming. Everybody signed up to experience what they signed up to experience. Most of every people that's going to die, they already chose how they're going to die in advance before they freaking incarnated in their body. It's not random. So if you can understand when your parent dies, when your child dies, they made agreements to die at that time to teach a lesson. It could be karmically linked. It could be that you have a propensity to never let go. You understand? You have to understand we're more than our physical bodies, and when we die in this physical body, we're existing everywhere else simultaneously. We never die. Death is only an abstract thought that was programmed into us. We will always live. We never die. So if you know that, start living your life, man. Start acting like you're just dying. You know, experience life for once.
Right. And the other thing too, when I hear people do predictions, I will sit there and think to myself, you have now altered that prediction because you put it out there, and now people's reaction to it are going to change the impact or the event. And not only that, but it's like, I remember watching the news when we would go to war as a kid. And the news anchors are like, yeah, we're on the front here in this city, and tomorrow we're going to be going here. And I'm like, why are we telegraphing how we're going to fight this war publicly? Because are we so naive that we're like, oh, yeah, the enemy's not going to watch this news station. They'll never know. And it's like, and that, and when you brought up Trump, and one of the things that I thought was interesting of Trump was whenever he did something, it was already done, and then he told you. He wasn't telegraphing it out like all the other presidents did in the past. And so I was like, I noticed that, and I was like, there's a change. Things are changing.
So you do understand that if something as big as Trump wins again, or they say that he lost the election again, when you know damn well that he won, you're not going to want to install a president for 4 years just to have the cabal take over that spot 4 years from now and install Hillary Clinton again. You think the United States would allow that to happen? So when people claim that Trump could be a lifelong president, I believe that certain things can happen, and this is probably that moment, because if you think about it, what happens if the World Economic Forum takes over the world in the United States? We're done.
Yeah, we're pretty much extinct.
So if you're worried about taking over the cabal and shutting them down and arresting them every 4 years, it'll never end. You know what I'm saying? So something's going to have to happen where we stop being a democracy, because democracy is from France. Why are we using a French judicial system? And in France, you're guilty until proven innocent. That's how America is. We're using a French government system with the law connected to Britain. Like, all attorneys are British accredited registered, means they are bar certified. The moment you are bar certified, you have to now register as a foreign agent to the United States by law as part of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, which means you no longer have jurisdiction to do anything inside the United States except for within the physical city limits of Washington, D.C., of the District of Columbia, because everything located outside of the District of Columbia, they don't technically have jurisdiction. It's fake jurisdiction. Yeah. And that's why they have the Uniform Commercial Code that runs on top of the Constitution, but the Uniform Commercial Code, which is all the laws and statutes that they use to enforce policy enforcement, police, crimes. The Supreme Court already ruled that any law, any statute, because remember, a statute is only a legal, it's a recommendation, it's not a law. Does that make sense? They say any statute that is written that is contrary to the Constitution is null and void on its face the day it was created. So all these unconstitutional laws they try to enforce, the Supreme Court ended up ruling that it was unconstitutional for them to do all this in the first place. I've been saying this for so long, and no one believed me. All this stuff, I've studied law for 25 years, man. I've been taking measure of the police for 25 years. They've been physically and mentally abusing me, and I got smart. I got really smart with law, to the point where just my law book collection, it's pretty freaking massive. And I have Bouvier's 1856. That's the books that the Supreme Court uses to interpret law. And then from Bouvier's law, you have Black's law and all the different editions where they basically changed the definition of all law terms for the layman, where you can no longer interpret law because You're using definitions so far removed from the actual source that is unchangeable. Bouvier's 1856, it lists all the legal definitions of everything. And they've changed all the definitions in our government. So that's how they've taken advantage of us. That's how they stole our property. That's how they can take our children. All that's illegal. They cannot legally do that because they technically don't have jurisdiction to do that. Because all of our contracts that were made against our will, like the birth certificate, it's not legally binding because, Michael, you never signed your birth certificate contract to even accept that you would be named Michael. You didn't. That was your terms of service. Your parents signed it. Therefore, it's not legally binding. And the Constitution clearly says, as a part of Uniform Commercial Code 1-308, that unless two minds meet and agree on terms, and one of those people has a right to decline certain things and still proceed legally, therefore it's a legally binding agreement. But basically nothing is legally binding anymore. And I believe that's how we're going to win in the end, how we're going to take down the Federal Reserve, how we're going to challenge and get our jurisdiction back so that we can become a republic. We haven't been a republic since the Act of 1871. Before that, we were a country. 1871, we became a corporation. So basically, Lincoln, he freed humans to physically own them as physical slaves for profit, but expanded it to the Federal Reserve physically owns every human being under a central bank as collateral for the stock market through the birth certificate. So it's just a long legal rabbit hole that goes so deep that you have to use the old school textbooks to actually uncover all the truth. And that's how I predicted everything that I've been right on with all the laws and how everything would be illegal, everything I've ever called. And I've not lost one argument over that. Over time, I was proved every time I was right. So we just need to go back to a republic. We need to get to the point where we kick out the World Economic Forum. We stop allowing these central banks to control everything. Because like the last 7 countries we invaded, those were the last 7 countries that didn't have central banks. That's why we invaded Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. They didn't have central banks. Gaddafi had made his own bank outside the central bank, and they killed him for it because he just released a gold-backed dinar, which means that the Rothschilds, the Orsinis, that's who the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers really are, that they're the paternal and maternal line of the Orsini family. I was just speaking about this today, how you ever heard of the Black Pope?
I have.
Black Pope's name is Pepe Orsini. The Black Pope is above the Gray Pope. The Black Pope is also above the Gray Pope and the White Pope. So imagine that the spokesperson of the Vatican, the mouthpiece publicly, is the White Pope. He truly has no power. He's a figurehead. That's just a pedophile. I don't know if I can say that here, but that's what he's into, and they're basically worshiping Anunnaki gods, and they're taking part with human sacrifice and doing all kinds of really dark stuff. And it's because we're here now, because we've worked on evolution as humanity for so long that all these truths are now being uncovered. And this is the time we have to rebel, man. Imagine if the United States falls. The entire world is waiting for the United States to fight back. All the other countries have risen against their governments. They have removed their dictators in mass. The United States is the last stronghold, man. If America falls, the world falls.
Right. And we're actually, I just noticed, over 2 hours. So
I know, man. We could talk about some good stuff for a long time, man. Stuff.
I know. I was like,
you're like, good Lord, man. We talked like 1,001 subjects already.
I know. I'm sitting here thinking on Rumble. I'm like, how am I going to tag everything that we talked about?
That happens to me all the time. It's like you only get 30 hashtags for Rumble. Like, how do you summarize existential conversations that were so complex that were like, again, keys to awakening, and only put that in 30 search words?
Yeah.
Stupid. Why do they only give us 30 search words? They're controlling us. Imagine if they gave us 100 search words, people would find
or
us.
1,000.
Man.
But so we're gonna have to call it because it's getting late for me, and I know it's getting super late for you. And I know we could keep going on for another hour or two, but
I like to do deep dives.
yeah.
Hey, Heidi, glad you loved it. I'm glad you loved it. I want to be on your show soon. We were talking about that. I send you a heart.
I love Heidi, and being on her shows is so much fun. And yeah, you're right, Heidi. Better late than never. And yep, it's definitely one to catch up on.
Whoop whoop.
Yeah, we love you, Heidi. You're awesome. But so, and to wrap this up, and I'd love to have you back on, and continue going down the rabbit hole. And I know Lauren had a question, but I just feel like it's such an intricate question. We'll have to save it for the next time you're on, if you're available to come back.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So, if for those that are watching, from everything from, as I'm kind of trying to figure out how to word this, because you've really opened my mind to how time works and everything, is I always would say, from your life experience, no matter where at, from birth to now. But I'm realizing in talking with you, that's all the same moment. So I'm like, I got to think now, how do I word that question? But so, okay, here we go. So, from the perspective of Drago, here now, what is a golden nugget of information you would want to leave everyone that's watching this to kind of inspire and kind of, just help people that are listening? What's one little nugget?
I would say that everybody needs to take this moment and look at their life, and more than likely realize that you don't love yourself. And it's hard to love other people fully if you can't look yourself in the mirror and say, I love you back. So if you truly think you don't love yourself, this is part of your evolution. And that's one of the biggest things we find in this pursuit of this epic play we're in, man. Like, we all lose ourselves in living for other people. But again, we love everybody but ourselves. So imagine if you're having a traumatic life right now and you don't love yourself, you will repeat this life again with the same people, the same situations, until you start loving yourself. Because this is why we incarnate into these abusive relationships and these lives that are so hard to understand, and you feel like a victim and stuff. It's because you've shown the universe that you keep making the same mistakes over and over. You keep making a left over and over. You keep going back to an addictive habit over and over. You keep going for that ex that you should stay around. You should just avoid them, but you just can't be in the moment. Stop living in the past. Stop freaking about what's about going to happen in the future, and realize there is only now in this moment. And what you truly suffer from doesn't actually exist, because what you're suffering from is memories of the past and your imagination creating events that technically hasn't even happened, and it's ruining your life. You need to learn to forgive the people who harmed you. You don't have to forgive them to their face. We learned with QHHT hypnosis that you have the ability to just forgive them to the world, like to the universe. They taught you something major. You learned a major lesson. Thank them for making you stronger. Walk away with that lesson. Never look back.
That's awesome. And so, thank you, Drago, for coming on and Full transparency, it was my fault with the time glitch today, so that had both of us a little rattled tonight, and so I apologize for that, and I own my role in that, and it was my mistake, so I own it, and so it happens, life happens, and you were gracious about it, and were like, okay, yeah, willing to work with me on it, so thank you for that.
I love challenges. So like if you twist up my plans, I'll make it work no matter what. That's why I'm a good soldier, because I can make anything happen at any time. Throw me in a left field. I will hit my objective every single time, man. And just remember, I will be speaking at the Full Disclosure Now conference in St. Pete, Florida at the Serrata Beach Resort, July 15th to the 18th. And you can buy tickets at fulldisclosuremovement.org. We're going to have some of the most famous secret space program experiencers, people who went through MK Ultra, some famous remote viewers from the Farsight Institute. Laura Eisenhower is going to be there speaking with me. It's going to be freaking amazing. Please come and see us. Again, you're going to have the most amazing time, and it's happening next month in St. Pete Beach. Other than that, you can find me at fractaloflight.com for QHHT hypnosis sessions. If you want your life changed, I'm the guy to see.
Definitely. And the links are for finding Drago are in the description. So that was part of the fun of sizing the bio, was to fit the links in. So
it does get kind of hard sometimes. Like, again, yeah, you can only fit so much.
But I will say good night to everyone. Good day, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Make it a blessed day, and remember, as you go through the day, you are in this moment. This moment is all there is, and don't let the fear of the past or future interfere with you, because as a wise man once said, fear is the mind killer, so don't let it get to you. Rise above it, fill with love. Love conquers all. So thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Until next time.
Till next time.